Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're gonna review Pepper's Ghost by the band Arena.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So as is customary on this channel, let me introduce you some of my favorite bits from this album. This album is called Pepper's Ghost and it's Arena's 6th studio album. Now coming out in 2005, this is an album considered as neo-prog. Now honestly to me this album really feels like hard symphonic prog mostly, and I think it's really true to that description. Now right from the start I really got the sense that this album feels like Rush music, mostly like 2112 or the Cygnus songs on Hemispheres and Farewell to Kings. Now I couldn't find anywhere that was mentioned that this band was actually inspired by Rush, but it really feels like it, so it might be a coincidence, but they probably know at least about Rush as a band, even if they're not directly inspired by them. Cause after all, this is neo-prog and the idea of neo-prog is being inspired by the greats of the past, so yeah, if you like those Rush songs and albums that I just told you about, then you're probably gonna really like this album as well. Now, it's really reminiscent on the first track, which is also my favorite, called Bound and Fair. I think that one really has like the guitars that sound like Rush and the overall tone that really does feature that kind of sound. And it's actually quite refreshing because I cannot tell you if we've actually had a band on here that resembled that unique sound. So although this is not a concept album, it still has the idea of featuring 7 unique stories on them. Mostly, let's say they talk about different characters, people like comic book characters, Sherlock Holmes, and maybe most importantly about the renowned 19th century scientist, which is the inventor of the Pepper's Ghost illusion, called Henry Pepper. So if you've been following this series for a while, you would know that I have a somewhat of a love-hate relationship with neo-prog. Now there's a lot of reasons for it and I'm not going to get into this, but what I am going to say that this album luckily falls under the love category, and for that it really falls pretty hard on that because I really love this album. And you know, this album is really unique and it has something which is pretty rare as I see it in most albums out there. The songs on this album, they're pretty continuously good with all of them, let's say. So in a lot of albums, you know, you have that one track which you know for sure that it was the leading force that made this album be in the first place. So take stuff like, you know, Tarkus by ELP or 2112, which I've just mentioned by Rush. You know that those tracks were the most well thought out, and then there's like other tracks which are mostly B-sides and fillers and stuff that is not as good as the one, but this album really only has good songs on it. I cannot tell you if there's one song on here which was like better than the rest, you know, like that one Bohemian Rhapsody. I think they're all really good and they all differ in different lengths and in musical ideas, but as a whole I love them all and they range from, let's say, great songs to perfect songs. And yes, although they range from that range, I would still say that I would not want to skip any song on this album. I think they're all great and I couldn't imagine myself zoning out on any song on here. and I couldn't really imagine myself zoning out on any song on here. And honestly, I love this album purely for the good music that's found on it. I had no prior expectations to this album, I've never heard of this band, I came to this barely knowing anything about what I was going to hear besides the fact that it's neo-prog and it's 50 minutes long. And that's about it, but I was so surprised by the quality of this album and by the amount of enjoyment I could extract from it. I can confidently say that I think the two, let's say, instruments or players that really propelled this album forward were the vocalist Rob Soden and the guitarist John Mitchell, both of them doing a fantastic job at getting, their own nuanced performances across and having this album be so good. Of course, there's other three band members, one on the keyboards, one on the drums, and one on the bass. They're all doing a great job, they all shine in different places, but when it comes to actually being like the main show, it's those two players. And honestly, Pepper's Ghost has two of the things which I really love when they come up in albums, but they usually don't come up in most songs and albums. And those two things being meaningful guitar solos and, let's say memorable lyrics. Like not long into this album, I already understood that whenever a guitar solo was starting, I was already on the edge of my seat because I knew it was gonna be fantastic, and I've not heard great guitar solos in a while now, and I'm so happy that this album has multiples of them. And the lyrics and the singing on this album, as I said, they're also great. The lyrics are so good, like they're meaningful, they're actually telling a story. I had a fun time listening and actually following along with the storylines. And another thing I really like about how Rob sings is the fact that everything is really cohesive. You can actually understand everything that he's saying, and honestly, I didn't really need a lyrics sheet to actually know what he was saying because it matched so well and he was speaking so, precisely that I could just enjoy the music without having to, stimulate myself with like the screen that shows me the lyrics online. And yes, Pepper's Ghost really doesn't have any low points on it. If it does have any, they always, build back up to some big point, which makes it all like worth it. And honestly, I find that this album really does get across what it wants to do, and it's good all the way through. Is it perfect? No, but it's definitely as close to perfect as you can possibly get. So when it comes to this cover, I think it's a neat cover, but it's not really my taste. I usually prefer, the simpler covers, the ones which don't have a lot going on them. But that's just me, I guess. I also really love the comic book style of things. I love that it doesn't really go all the way with it. Let's say like albums like Crack by Area, which they really like have a similar name, so I don't think that has anything to do. I'm just rambling on here. But I like the comic book aesthetic found on here. The color palette is also very cool, and I'm really anticipating making this thumbnail for now. But another thing which I've noticed after looking at it a couple of times is the fact that the title of this album is actually written twice, because apparently it's like written in this like, medieval, let's say, I don't know, bold font, like on top, which serves as the outline for like this inner space, which also has Pepper's Ghost written inside of it. And I don't know why they chose to do it, but I think it's a cool effect, and it doesn't really matter where you look, you're gonna get the title like both ways. And I think that's something really nice, which I have not seen being used ever. And when it comes to the rating of this album, I'm gonna have to give it a high 9 out of 10.
9.
But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to Obscura by the band Gorguts. This is going to be one of the darkest albums we're going to have on here. This is like akin to, death metal. And if you know that album, stay tuned for tomorrow. But for some reason, I don't expect a lot of you people to like this album, Pepper's Ghost, today, and also Obscura. But if there's some, odd breeds out there, then, come for tomorrow because it's going to be interesting indeed. But that is all, guys. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.